Welcome to the Bible Forum. It's Sunday night. We're here together. We've got a lot to talk about. Glad that you're here. This is a Sunday in July. It's early in July, and we've got a lot to talk about. We have a president who went over to Europe again. We've got other issues here at home. Lots of stuff to talk about here tonight on the Bible Forum as we try to solve all the problems in 2 hours or less. I took note this week, interested as I was, that only hours after the United Nations Educational, Scientific, Cultural Organization, UNESCO, had declared the tomb of the patriarchs in the old city of Hebron in the West Bank an endangered Palestinian World Heritage Site, our U.S. ambassador to the United Nations, Nikki Haley, said the move was both tragic and an affront to history, and that the United States would review its ties with the world body as a result of this decision. Did you hear that? The United States will review its ties with the United Nations as a result of this decision. UNESCO passed its second anti-Israel resolution in less than a week, just this past Friday, during the World Heritage Committee's 41st Annual Summit that's currently taking place in Krakow, Poland. 12 countries voted in favor of the Hebron decision and 3 opposed it, while 6 countries abstained. That makes it 12-9. Both the United States and Israel protested vigorously against this motion. The voting was secret. Very seldom ever have they seen anything like that before. The World Heritage List nations were asked their decision simply by a show of hands. 3 countries, Poland, Croatia, and Jamaica, asked for a secret ballot. But the other countries objected, and they moved on. That's where we are in the world. We have our president over there talking to these folks. He was in Poland, great hit there. He has sat down with the heads of state all over the place. I think it's G20. Maybe it's not G20. It's a whole bunch of them. And one of them was Vladimir Putin. Did you see the video of those interactions? I mean, they were like old buds. Putin smiling, Trump bouncing. Everything was fine. We're told that he brought up the issues specifically of the election fraud and so forth twice. And Putin in both cases said they didn't have anything to do with it, he didn't know anything about it, and so forth and so on. Here's the thing, though. These 2 guys are bullies. Yeah. They're the big dogs in the herd, both of them. And while Putin struts around and makes all kinds of noises and looks down his nose and snubs people, he doesn't do that with Trump. Have you noticed that? He and Trump seem to get along just fine, even with smiles. You know why? Because bullies know bullies. They understand each other. They're both on the same page. I'd do it to you if I got a chance, and you know I'd do it. You'd do it to me. That's how they think. And you get somebody in there, President of the United States, I don't care who they are, who's kind of a namby-pamby, oh, well, you know, we're trying to get along. He's just going to run all over you. All 5'4" of him. It's a fascinating thing to watch. What's not so fascinating and more troubling is what's going on in Turkey. Turkish president and his government continue to target Christians in that nation. President Erdogan seized control of 50 Syriac churches just in the last few weeks. The effort apparently is to bring Sharia law to Turkey. Last year, 2016, 6 churches were seized, one of which was an ancient place of Christian worship, and there was an outcry. Turkey consists of that land we used to call Asia Minor, a place where the Apostle Paul spent much of his time in ministry. It's where the 7 churches of Revelation were. Some are still there. Some of the strongest Christian churches have been there, but also some of the most demonic. When Jesus told John that Pergamos was where Satan's seat was, he was talking about a city in western Turkey. Today we call it Bergama. It's on the west coast of Turkey. It's about 20 miles from the Aegean Sea. The word parchment is derived from that Greek city. Pergamino in Spanish, Pergamina in Italian. Library larger than any library anybody's ever known about. That's where Satan's seat was. That's where Erdogan is starting to kick off another conquest of the world. According to Levi Bolton, the former executive director of the Arizona Police Association, he said when Phoenix, the city of Phoenix, suspended its sanctuary city policies, instead of endangering citizens, the exact opposite happened. He said, we saw a decrease in crime. Who could have guessed that? Under the new policies, law enforcement could ask suspects if they are in the U.S. legally, and they could inform immigration agencies about violations of federal laws. Fox News reported that the murder rate in Phoenix fell by 27%. Robberies fell by 23%. Assaults fell by 13%. Even more crimes fell, with burglaries at 14%, thefts at 19%. One study, however, challenges the illegal alien narrative. A 6-year study from the University of Riverside, California, found that across 55 cities, no statistically discernible difference in violent crime rates, rape, or property crime existed. It seems Trump making a promise to curb illegal alien crime without any other legal action has caused a steep decline in illegal border crossings. Obama's DREAM Act, the childhood arrivals, if you're here you can stay, is still the law of the land. But things, they are changing. The Associated Press reported this past week that House Republicans are working to effectively gut the Johnson Amendment. You know about the Johnson Amendment? You've been in church, evangelical churches, anytime in the last 20 years, you probably do. You just don't know its name. This was an amendment that was approved by Republican President Dwight Eisenhower in 1954. In June of that year, in June of this year, Vice President Mike Pence told the Faith and Freedom Coalition that President Donald Trump supports ending or limiting the Johnson Amendment. He said free speech doesn't stop at the door of our churches, synagogues, and places of worship. What are we talking about? We're talking about a law that supposedly makes it a crime to speak politically in church, officially. The law that supposedly forbids inviting politicians to speak in church. A law that supposedly outlaws pastors from educating their congregations in terms of political candidates. The law that has been used to rob churches of their tax-exempt status, should they do any of the above. Unless, of course, it was a black church. And you've seen it on TV. They make no bones about it. They go right in there. They have a big election campaign right there in the church. They're not bashful about it. And we think that the black churches are getting away with murder. We can't do that, but they can. And the truth is, always has been, we could have done the same thing. The Johnson Law did not hinder churches speaking of politics or inviting politicians to speak. All it did was say that should you do this, it must be done in a fair and equitable manner. You have to invite all the candidates. You have to explain all the policies. You have to encourage everyone to vote, not just those you think will vote for your guy. This is a law that came about as a result of Senator Johnson from Texas at the time, Johnson's frustration with Southern Baptists. The Southern Baptists did not like that profane, immoral, crude man from Texas, and he was every bit of that. Neither did they care for his politics. So they set out early in the 1950s to torpedo his re-election, and it almost worked. Johnson was determined to get even. Ignorance and fear kept the church quiet for the next 30 years. And then groups started to come along that actually educated pastors and Christians alike. And churches started challenging the law. Funding of this law is what kept churches and the government in court. And now we have a president who's willing to say, we're going to do away with it. It didn't do anything in the first place except threaten people. And that was just a selfish thing on his part. Isn't that amazing? That's what you can do if you're in Congress. You have heard probably most of your life, if not all of your life, in the advertising world that sex sells. The idea that sex sells has been around for over 100 years. Pearl Tobacco is generally credited with being the first company to use sex appeal in advertising. They had a shocking ad in 1871 featuring a mostly nude woman standing above the stormy seas. Judging by what we've seen over the years, you would have to assume that sex does in fact sell. But now a University of Illinois advertising professor by the name of John Wirtz got curious about it, set out to discover just how effective sex appeal was in advertising. And what he found was surprising. After analyzing 78 peer-reviewed studies, Wirtz discovered that people aren't any more likely to purchase a product or even remember a brand name if sex appeal is used in the advertising. In fact, consumers are more likely to view that brand or product negatively. He said, quote, "We found literally zero effect on participants' intention to buy products. There is absolutely no indication that there's a positive effect." So why does the myth persist? And why do we keep getting this stuff? You know. A 2015 study conducted by Ohio State University produced similar results. The researchers theorizing that consumers have simply become desensitized to the sex in advertising. Have you? I know I pretty much have. They've got to go pretty far before I pay attention to the fact that they're focused that way. I tend to see the product. That's if I look at advertising at all. Advertising generally has not influenced my decisions over the years. A Canadian baby girl has been issued a health document by the Canadian government that does not specify whether that girl is a male or female. This is what the campaigners for this sort of thing are claiming is a possible world first. Her name is Cyril Altly Doty. She was born November last year in British Columbia. She was born, as they say, outside the medical system, meaning she was either born at home or in a private place of some sort. And she did not undergo a genital inspection after her birth. Now, I don't think people covered their eyes, but they just didn't go that way. The mother is a member of a group called Gender Free, and she identifies as non-binary trans. That's where we're going. The group's stated vision on their website is, quote, to remove all gender, sex designations from identity documents. Mom says it's up to Cyril to decide how they identify. They who? Cyril. That's the pronoun for her. I don't know. It's nuts. When they are old enough, she says, to develop their own gender identity, she can make that decision. I mean, they can make that decision. Apparently, the Canadian government balked a little at first, but eventually a birth certificate and a health card with the sex listed as you arrived one day without explanation, about 6 months later. See, Canada has a universal health care system paid for by the taxes of the people, and the cards themselves are the responsibility of the individual Canadian province. And so they had to work through that legal situation. The Gender Free ID Coalition believes that the U stands for unspecified or unknown, and that Cyril is the first child to be registered in such a way without sex or gender being specified. The British Columbia's Ministry of Health did not respond to requests for a comment. Do you live in a Bible-minded city? Or maybe not. Well, the top 10 were listed for us this past week. They are all in the South, but you knew that. Chattanooga is at number 1. It was number 1 2 years ago. Last year it slipped to number 2. Back. Birmingham, Anniston, Tuscaloosa, Alabama are all number 2. They're statistically tied. Roanoke and Lynchburg, Virginia are tied at 3. Tennessee's Tri-Cities area is number 4. After that is Shreveport, Charlotte, North Carolina, Springfield, Missouri, Little Rock and Pine Bluff, Arkansas, Knoxville, and then in North Carolina and South Carolina is Greenville, Spartanburg, Anderson, and Asheville. At the opposite end of the spectrum, at least Bible-minded cities, the least Bible-minded, I can't read what I wrote. The least Bible-minded cities were all where? New York, number 1. Albany, Schenectady, Troy, in rotation. All of them around 10% of their total citizenry. All 3 of them came in second. Again, no comment. What flag may you legally fly above the stars and stripes? Did you see my website this week? On the carousel, you know, those pictures that just rotate around, I put a picture of an American flag on a flagpole, and above it was a Christian flag. Were you offended by that? Until 1975, the only flag authorized to fly over the United States flag on the same pole was the flag of the Christian church. I didn't know that. There's a picture of it on the inside cover of the Navy edition of the Roosevelt Bible given to service members during World War II. And this from the official U.S. flag code, quote, "No other flag or pennant should be placed above or if on the same level to the right of the flag of the United States of America except during church services conducted by naval chaplains at sea, when the church pennant may be flown above the flag during the church services for the personnel of the Navy." Not the God pennant or the Islamic pennant, not even a Jewish pennant, but the Christian pennant. In order to appease political correctness through theological ambiguity, it was called the church pennant. But it's clearly a flag of Christianity. You've seen it. A white field with a red cross and a blue square, in a blue square. Roosevelt, a Jew, an agnostic Jew, no doubt, was a very smart man, and a Democrat at that. Did he know that there were atheists in America during World War II? Of course he did. Did he know there were Muslims in America in the 1940s? I think he did. So how did he get away with all this? The answer is because Roosevelt understood that it was simply common sense that a government of the people, by the people, and for the people should reflect the majority sentiment of that people. He also knew that such politically incorrect and inconvenient facts such as this would always have socialist autocrats like Bernie Sanders feeling the burn of anti-Christian zeal. None of that, however, changed the facts. And you have to ask yourself, when are we going to stand up instead of lying down and letting people walk all over us? Don't know. Maybe never.